So good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jason Evans, and I'm going to be taking us through this short-ish section on case studies in exploring strategy. I think this is the sort of layout of the short session that we're going to be doing today. So we want to introduce ourselves to you all. There are three of us in the team now, myself, Clive, and Jocelyne. And we'd also like to sort of give you a bit of an overview of what it is that we do right now as part of the case team and the case management process. At 11:45, we've got Wafa, who will be talking to us about a case study that she's developing right now. And then at 12, we've got Oksana, who's going to be talking about a case that she has developed for previous editions, as well as a supplement that she completed for us as well for the Revel platform. And then we're also going to ask you or sort of put a call out for cases, let you know the kind of things that we're looking for, and go into a little bit of detail about how you can start the process of perhaps working with us on a case. So to get started then, the three devilishly good-looking people in front of you are the case study team. I'll start with myself and then hand off to my colleagues to introduce themselves. So my name's Jason Evans. I am a senior lecturer in entrepreneurship at Aston University in Birmingham. I've been working with the ES Cases team for, I think this is the fourth edition that I've worked on it. And I feel pretty confident that I know what I'm doing now. Although sometimes, things don't always go to plan. But yeah, I think I can bring my experience from both my lecturing and classroom experience, as well as from a pretty decent range of publishing experience, both through case study work, pedagogic work, and academic work as well. So I think I'll pass next to Clive. Clive, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, I'm Clive Kerridge. I'm a teaching fellow in strategy at Aston Business School, and I've got quite a long international career, so I guess I'm what you'd call a practitioner academic. I've been involved with exploring strategy since, I think, the 10th edition, when I started off with the organised crime case study that appeared in that, and have been co-editing it since, I think, then or the 11th. And I guess one of the key things we try to do is focus people on cases into how are you going to teach it, or more to the point, what are the kind of things that students are going to learn? So we've had several quite good cases that you come to us that are interesting, but often it's the case of, okay, how do you focus those on teaching? And I think particularly if you do work with us on cases, then that's the thing we'll push you on. And probably if I introduce it on to Jocelyne, she'll be the friendly face of coercion from here on in.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. Jocelyne Fleming. I'm at Aston with Clive and Jason. I'm a senior teaching fellow. I've been working in higher education for about 25 years, all within a business school setting. So teaching, management, working with businesses in the region and my areas of interest really are leadership, entrepreneurship, change management, which obviously all equal strategy. You need to be able to do strategy to do all that. I teach on both undergraduate and postgraduate programs, and I do have publication experience both in journals and within the textbook setting. And I'm delighted to be working with Clive and Jason, of course, the wider team. Look forward to the challenge.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So that's the three of us. And I think often through this process of developing cases for the book and working with various authors, it's often the case that we don't actually meet face to face anymore. So it's probably a nice thing for you to, well, maybe not in my case, but it's nice for you to know what we look like and at least know who is you would be working with. And indeed, for many of you in the meeting today, who you have worked with in the past. So what do we do then as part of a case team? So primarily we manage the entire case development, the editing and the finalization process. We do this typically alongside the chapter authors, and that's because the case studies that we develop are aligned to those chapters that you find in Exploring Strategy. Obviously, it makes sense because it's really useful for educators to have some additional resources that they can use either as practice activity, development ideas, or getting further into the topics of a case. And indeed, in many instances, cases from exploring strategy used as assessment as well for those that use the book and the chapters. So we initially will discuss case proposals of anybody that has a case that they think might be useful for inclusion in the book. And at that stage, we'll also suggest directions for the case. So what can often happen is that someone will come to us with a case idea that in principle seems really interesting, but it requires a little bit of direction and a little bit more consideration for chapter elements. And so that's where we come to refining the case. So as a team and individuals working with a case author, we will typically help to kind of direct the focus of the case to either a broader topic theme around a chapter, or perhaps a much more focused element, for example, a framework that's in one of the chapters. And in that way, we can make sure that the case is really well aligned to the contents of the book. And that acts as a really strong kind of reference point for students and educators when they use the case, that they can go back to the book and get the underpinning framework or theories or whatever that might be within the book. We also refine the cases that we work with authors on to make sure that they're as current as they can be. Quite often this happens at the end of the case process. We'll look, for example, at updated data, things that might have happened in the environment that would impact the case, or something that's on the horizon that may well impact the case in the near future. Because the cases in the book often are in there for well, certainly until at least the next edition, but people use older editions as well. So it's really important for us to make sure the cases are as current as they can be at the point that they're published. And then finally, we also refine the case in terms of the appropriate level and language and content. Now, when we say level, there's a whole range of different students that will use this text, from undergraduates through to postgraduates, MBAs, and so on. So it's really important that we make sure that the cases in our books, as best as they can be, are also as accessible as they can be. So that's something else we work with authors where we look to refine those cases. And then we also support our case authors with the process of publishing in the final book. So obviously that requires us to support people sticking to deadlines. Typically, we don't have an issue with this, but every now and then extra support might be needed, so we're able to offer that. We also work around a proofreading process where we go through several stages of edit and proof. So at the final stage, we'll proofread a sample of what it's going to look like in the book, and we'll make sure that it is as good as it can be and as free from mistakes as it can be. We also support authors with queries, so where they might have a query about something, the way something might look in the book, something might be presented, or they might just have some queries about the ideas they have or how to develop the case as it progresses. And then finally, we also support in terms of accompanying images. We don't produce images, obviously, but when it goes to Pearson at the final stages to be typeset, then we go through a process of looking at the type of images that might well fit that book. And some case authors have specific images that they'd like to use, and so we liaise between case authors and Pearson in sorting out things like permissions for those images. And then the final stage of our process our process in case studies is to support and coordinate the development of the high quality teaching notes. And this really brings us first full circus right back to the case proposal, because when we ask for a case proposal, we also ask our case authors to think about what kind of questions they might ask and what kind of activities might be involved in the teaching notes at the very, very beginning. Now, of course, this is a developmental process, so it isn't the case that teaching notes have to be in place at the beginning of the case process. Of course not. But as we get towards the end of the process of developing the case, we then start to look much more deeply at what those case notes are going to look like, and we start to develop those as well. So that's what we do as a case team. We obviously communicate very closely with one another, and we communicate very closely with the main text authors, as well as working individually with our case authors. So each case author will typically be assigned either myself, Clive, or Jocelyne to work alongside, and that's a one-to-one relationship throughout the entire period of the development of the case. And so that's what we do. And what we wanted to do next then was maybe to take the opportunity to introduce a couple of examples of cases at different stages of development. So we're going to start with Wafa. Wafa, I believe you're with us.
Yes.
Hi. So Wafa is currently developing a case, or is in the process of developing a case for the next edition. And I think, Wafa, you'd like to talk us through what that case is about and the process you've undergone in developing it.
Okay. Is my voice clear? Yeah.
Can you see the slides there, Wafa?
Yes.
Excellent.
And your voice is clear, yes, Wafa.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for being here. So this is a brief outline about what I have developed for today. So starting first with an introduction. So I am my name is Wafa Saimi. I am a PhD scholar at Aston University. My main interests about entrepreneurship, innovation, and cultural values. Can I change the slides?
Sure.
Yes, thank you. So the research interest, it's about innovation and culture, as I stated before, growth aspiration. And I just finished my first empirical paper, which is about the impact of cultural values and in innovation. So starting to the case study, next, yes. The key objective and values in developing the case study was mainly two main points. The first one is just to bring an international perspective in the context of Saudi Arabia. So the case study that I'm working on, it's about a Saudi female entrepreneur, and thinking about it from two main focus that was mentioned in the Exploring Strategy book, which is resources and capabilities. And the second one, innovation and entrepreneurship. And next, please. So the chapter that I'm really addressing and focusing on, I'm proposing the case study to be included on is chapter 11, which is about entrepreneurship and innovation, and mainly addressing the following learning objective, which is anticipating the key issue facing entrepreneurs in opportunity recognition, in making choices during the entrepreneurial process, and in various stages of growth from startup to exit. So the proposed case study mainly addressing two main themes. This is usually found in the end of the Exploring Strategy book. So the proposal is going to be in chapter 11. The cases could be fit more in chapter 11, which is about entrepreneurship, and mainly addressing the resources and capabilities. And next, please. So,
sorry, Wafa, I'm going to get there. There we go.
Yes, sir. So the title of the case, it's about a business, is called She Works. So as I said before, she's a Saudi female entrepreneur. And because when I want to align it to one of the main concepts that was been discussed in the chapter, which is called opportunity recognition. So the main theme, it will be about the female entrepreneurs the female entrepreneurs in the Saudi context, and then the way that she was able to grasp the opportunity. As you can see, She Works, as just to give you a brief about what is the business she managed. It's the Saudi Arabia first women-oriented and co-working space and business hub. So this entrepreneurs was able to seize the opportunity in finding the market gap and converting it from starting first in designing a working space and then expanding her businesses to make it a business hub. So the theme that will be included in the case, just a brief about her business, and then the market gap that she was able to anticipate to address, and then the key success factor for the business that was driven by the entrepreneurial capabilities, and lastly, the key challenges faced in the terms of accessibility of financial resources. So my main aim is to let the students explore the graph that was been in the chapter 11, which is about opportunity recognition from three main pillars, which is the starting first and from the entrepreneur perspective, from the capabilities and the resources that was been used, and lastly, from the market gap, like how the entrepreneurs was able to find the market gap. And I designed the questions in a form of letting the student to try to apply how the theoretical perspective was been answered. So the questions will be as follow, like, what were the key indicators in the process of opportunity recognition by the SheWork founders? Second, what is the entrepreneurs could have done differently to overcome the financial challenges faced after COVID-19 pandemic? And in this point, I try to consider the point that the business started, in 2016, until in 2019, they were facing some challenges. So this idea gives some contemporary perspective for the student to think about the current situation and how this could affect the business. And question number 3, based on the SheWorks case study, what kind of skills and trade do you think the entrepreneurs need to successfully recognize the opportunity? And lastly, how can female entrepreneurs in Saudi Arabia overcome the key challenges in accessing financial resources to capitalize on the future opportunity in the overcoming economic landscape? This is basically to see it from the institutional perspective and environmental perspective, and how they can use the opportunity for that. Next, please. So the methodology used, basically, first starting for advancing my theoretical knowledge about how to write case studies, and then the sources information. I get the chance to connect with the owner or with the founder through LinkedIn, and had an interview with her. And definitely I took the ethical consent about sharing her resources, some of the resources to build the case study. And there were also some secondary sources, because the founder, she was been there in a couple of interviews. In fact, like, there were some very good interviews, like and even podcast. So she was very engaging in getting to the public, to be in the public. So that's helped also to support and acquire more knowledge about the business. And yes, next. So I'm here today just to have a recap for the point, which is what was the theme, the key themes that was addressed in the case study, and what is the methodology used in acquiring the information. I am here merely to discuss further recommendations to make this case study more effective, especially to listen from teachers and practitioners, and if I could improve it more effectively. Please share. I'm really looking for any questions or any recommendation. And also that's my email for even any further communication. Yes. So if you have any comments, if you have any suggestion, please feel free to ask. I am here really to make this more effective case study.
Thank you very, very much, Wafa. I really, really appreciate that. Well done. I think you've really presented your case really, really well there. I think Wafa would be very, very interested in any questions or comments that anybody has about that case. It is still in development, and frankly speaking, we're still at a relatively early stage of developing that case, but it certainly has great potential, and it's a really interesting, unique case that I hope that when we take it forward to the book, it's going to have a lot of impact. I think whilst we're waiting to see if anybody's got any questions and feedback, Wafa, just one point. I think the fact that you're able to use secondary and primary sources by being able to interview personally that founder, I think that's really, really useful for the case. Can you let us know how long you were able to speak to her and what kind of information you were able to get from her?
Yes. So the interviews was almost like 1 hour and 20 minutes. And we started first, like, to tell us, like, what is her background? Because the first question I asked, I know that now with the vision, like as the Saudi landscape, they are really supporting the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I asked her, did you were able to have institutional support? But in 2016, when she was starting it, it was purely funded by herself. So that's when resources and capability from strategical point of view was coming in. So she took me through, like, how did she started her business idea, how she was able to find the gap. And then when COVID hit, after 4 years in 2019, she closed her because because of the lockdown, she wasn't able to afford the co-working space. So then she tried to convert it to more about workshops. So she took me through even the key challenges that she faced. And yeah, so basically she took me through her business journey. and from her background, starting from her background in business to her, like, what she's doing now.
Excellent. And as I say, hopefully that will really come through in the case, and it'll be a really unique one for the book. So thanks very much, Wafa. So does anybody have any questions or feedback for Wafa in terms of that case that they'd like to get into now? Say that, I should stop sharing because I can't actually see. Bear with me. Excuse me, I've also got a bit of a cold. Apologies. Thank you, Wafa. That's great. So does anybody have a comment or a question for Wafa regarding the case that she's presented to us? If no, Wafa has given her email address and contact address if anybody wants to directly contact her. And also we're in communication as well. So if anybody would like to contact us directly, we can manage it that way as well.
I might just say one thing, Jason, if I can just butt in.
Sure.
It's always very useful when people do cases. We can always locate them in terms of a chapter or across several chapters. It's really useful if you can highlight which concept or tool or technique you're really addressing centrally with the case. I think that helps a great deal. So I would just make sure that you can say this specifically addresses these particular issues. So being precise rather than general, I think, is really helpful.
Thank you very much, Duncan. Appreciate that. Okay, well, Wafa, thank you so much for presenting your case. I'm really looking forward to keeping working with you on it. And hopefully, what we're looking at, about a year from now, it will look really nice in print as well. Thank you very much. So moving on then from a case that was in development at the early stages, Oksana, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Am I audible? Am I visible?
You are, and very clearly so. So great to hear you. Now, I've worked with Oksana on cases for about 4 years, but this is in fact the first time we've actually spoken to each other and know what we look like. So that's really nice, Oksana. Can I just say it's nice to meet you?
It is incredibly nice to put the face to the name, I must say. Even though your camera is off at the moment, I'm extremely thrilled. And we have worked for 6 years.
Yeah.
It's not
yeah.
4.
I think,
in 2017, I took over as the module leader of a strategy module for an MBA program. And I started to use Exploring Strategy as my core textbook. It was at a training on how to use Exploring Strategy that you announced the possibility of submitting a case. And that's when it all started, 2018.
Blimey. Okay. And time goes really quickly.
Time flies.
It's really, really nice to meet you. So, Oksana, you're going to talk to us then about your case that you've done for the last couple of editions of the book and the supplements, Going for a Ride. So over to you, and I'm happy to move the slides when you need me to do so.
Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. My name is Oksana Gerry, and I'm the associate head at Brunel Business School. When I first started working with Jason, I was doing extensive research on the sharing economy, and it's always part of my kind of pedagogical philosophy to write a case on research that I'm working on. Since I wrote quite extensively on Airbnb and Uber, I thought, how can I write a case that would maybe talk about companies that are a little bit less known to a broader audience, but still would be interesting to students, particularly in the MBA classrooms. And that's when the idea of the case came up. So let's go to the next slide. So I suggested a case, but this is the full title, Going for a Ride, Entrepreneurial Journeys in the On-Demand Transportation Sector. Again, we're talking 2018. By then, everyone was very well familiar with Uber, with platform business models. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I thought, let's expose students to companies that operate in the same space, but maybe in a slightly different fashion. And the brands are slightly less known. By today, they're very well known and well established, but at the time, a bit less so. So I put together a case that was structured as a chronological overview, 3 vignettes: BlaBlaCar, Lyft, and Turo. All these companies operate in on-demand mobility, but each has their own interesting journey and give a little interesting angle to this space. Let's go to the next slide, please. So the inspiration came originally from my research and from what I have observed in the MBA classroom. Students enjoy talking about companies that are topical. Even though we are surrounded by incredible established companies, students always want to know about companies that are maybe a little bit controversial, that are up and coming, that are often mentioned in the general press. And that's why I chose these three, because at the time, Lyft, Uber were quite controversial. There was a lot of conversation about the taxis fighting these on-demand transportation companies. So there was already quite a bit of interest from my students to this case. I structured this, as I said, as 3 vignettes. It's a chronological journey of each founder, how they came up with the idea, how the company was established, what was the first impetus for the business model, and how it has evolved. So for the first edition, the second edition of Exploring Strategy, I ended each case with companies being quite established, but they're looking for where to go next. And the teaching note was essentially focused on 2 areas. And the lecturers could use the case in 2 areas: the entrepreneurial journey, the ideation, coming up with an opportunity, development of the opportunity, and as the company evolves, repositioning the company. So that was one focus, and that was chapter 11, I believe. And please correct me if I'm wrong. And then the other focus that could be used in this case was platform business model, because all these companies, Lyft, just like Uber and Turo and BlaBlaCar, they all are organized as a business model, as a platform business where the platform connects the driver and the passenger, essentially, or the driver and the passenger, or a car and the passenger, which is the case of Uber. And so these 2 themes were where I have myself to use the case quite extensively. If I didn't use it in teaching, in my MBA teaching, I use it in the exam. If I didn't use the entire case, I used one of the vignettes. Therefore, for me, it came to be quite a heavily used case in my personal teaching. And every year I do mention transportation platform business models when I teach. And again, it resonates quite nicely with the students. The teaching note for the first edition was structured around entrepreneurship and platform business models. And then COVID hit. And of course, these companies were heavily affected by the lockdowns since passengers were not allowed to share rides with drivers. And Jason came up with the suggestion that I provide the update on what happened to these companies in the post-COVID recovery phase, how they fared through COVID and what happened next. So that's when I went back to the original draft and changed it to account for what happened to these 3 companies during COVID. And of course, by then, Uber got to be IPO'd in New York, same with Lyft. There were lots of updates on all of these companies, and that's why it was quite a welcome development of the case, kind of very natural, very authentic. And then last year, there was a little case note that was requested from me on Uber, because Uber itself, even though it was not part of the original case, it has moved through such a huge transformation. And last year, for the first time since the founding in 2009, Uber demonstrated profits. So 15 years, almost 15 years in operation and profits for the first time. So we wrote an addition, a note to the case on Uber, how it has evolved and how it, thanks to diversification and Uber Eats, got to profitability for the first time. So it has been a very, very good experience for me working with Jason. Of course, a lot of edits along the way, a lot of back and forth, but for anyone who is considering writing a case, especially on your research on something very topical, I would strongly encourage you. And I would say that it has helped me in my teaching experience, in my experience in the classroom. And I fall back to my beloved case often, as I do to many other cases in the Exploring Strategy textbook. So I'm looking to the next edition. I know that this case will now most likely join the online library, the online repository of cases, while I'm now considering some new ideas for the new edition.
Okay, thank you so much, Oksana. That's absolutely right. And I was just about to mention, well, apart from the fact that thank you very much, it is a really interesting case. And I think it's a testament to how interesting the case is that we've been able to update it and look at it through so many different angles throughout its sort of history in the book, from COVID through to Uber being becoming profitable and everything that's kind of happened in between. And what was actually really interesting for me as well, when I started editing this case with you way all those years ago, is that these were companies that I actually wasn't as aware of as I am now, certainly. BlaBlaCar was the one that was really interesting to me.
Well,
but yeah,
Jason,
so
maybe you were not familiar with those, but students were, because the younger
yes,
generation, they were the target market for all these innovations. They were
yeah.
the early adopters. They already knew about them.
Yeah, and I was going to say it really was very, very relevant to younger people. That's my experience. They've enjoyed using that case. And so I think you've also touched on another important point that's very important to raise here as well, is that we like to refresh the cases regularly to make sure that there's a good turnover of cases and a really, really good offering to users of the book. But with very good cases, we often do retain them for a couple of editions. And so this was one of those that we kept for a period of time. And we have decided to let it go now, just because we're going to try and refresh that section. But that's certainly not, an indictment on the text. The case still remains fantastic, and I think our intention is to move it into our classic case section, which is an online repository of all the best cases that we want to make sure that people still have access to through Pearson. So again, Oksana, thank you so much for being involved. And as you mentioned, you did say that you were interested in perhaps putting together another case. And so I'm going to be hassling you pretty soon for that as well.
Please do.
Thank you so much. Before Oksana goes, does anybody have any question or comments about that going for a ride case or anything that you've heard her speak about here today? No questions.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Oksana. I really appreciate your time. And the conversation we just had is a really good segue into the final section of what we're talking about. Oh, and thank you, Oksana. And there is your email there. And are you happy for people to contact you if they wish to? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you. So yeah, that's a really great segue into the final part of what we want to speak about, which is asking anybody here who would be interested in coming to work with us on cases. So we're always open to the idea of receiving new case ideas from members of the community. So what we thought we'd do is just kind of give an overview here of what it is really that we're looking for and how you can get started if you have a case that you would like to come and perhaps present to us and discuss taking forward. So as we've heard today from both Wafa and Oksana, the cases we're looking to develop are those that align to the chapters of Exploring Strategy. I've already had a conversation with Richard before we came to this this event, and I've been told that the chapters will remain the same as they were in the previous edition. So or certainly in terms of their numbering and title. So if you have a copy of the 13th edition and you're thinking about developing a case, please do have a look at the chapters in that edition, and you can think about how your case might align to one or maybe more of those chapters. It's worth mentioning, for those of you that have used the cases, you'll know that very often cases align to multiple chapters, not just one, although there will always be one that has a special focus. So yeah, please think about ES 13 chapters if you are thinking to submit a proposal. And then what we'd ask you to do is think about specific issues in those chapters. As Duncan said, a focused case is better than a broader case. So if there are specific issues or frameworks or elements that come through in a case, that's something we really have an interest in. I think thirdly is thinking about these cross-cutting themes. Not every case will have them, and we don't insist on that, but many do. And many actually work as a really nice secondary, or in some cases, a primary focus for that case. An example of that would be the net zero case that we had in the previous edition that was, by its nature, very much focused around the sustainability agenda. And as I highlighted earlier, we have those three key areas, which are sustainability, digital transformation, and not-for-profit. We're also looking for cases that are as current as they can be. We do have some that look back on historical elements by their nature it's required. So we do have, for example, a case around the strategic direction of Emmaus that naturally looks back at the development of that organization, its founder, and where it sits today in relation to that history. But by and large, the cases we're looking for need to be as current as they can be because they remain used for quite a long period of time. At the same time, we also have to be cautious about focusing too much on short-term current events. So, for example, Rishi Sunak is unlikely to be Prime Minister for that much longer, and so referring to him as the Prime Minister of the UK might not make sense in the broader sense. So we're also looking for cases that are interesting and relevant for an international audience. So the book is used internationally, and it's used at many different levels of study, ages of study. So we're really looking for an international focused suite of cases. Traditionally, I think it's fair to say we've been relatively UK and Eurocentric. We've started to develop that a lot in the last edition where we had cases from, for example, Africa. We had quite a few cases from Asia in there, but we're looking to expand even further as well. So any cases that have that kind of international element to it as well, we're really happy to receive. We're also looking for cases that have that teaching scheme in mind at the start of the process. As I mentioned, the teaching note, where we're going to go with this case, whether that be a case that will elicit a role play, for example. Is this the kind of case that might require students to go off and do some further research? And in that case, what would you like students to do? So having an idea of a kind of teaching scheme and how this case might fit into that teaching scheme is really, really useful. And I can give you a couple of examples of that. So Gerry's case around the plastics organisation is very much focused around a case study, a class-based not case study, apologies, role play, a class-based role play. And so that case, as it's been developed, is aligned very much to that opportunity to have a role play in the class. Whereas a case that I actually developed around a supermarket in Africa was much more focused around data. So students being able to go out, look at data and draw understanding from data. So thinking about the teaching scheme at the start of the process is really, really useful to develop in the case. And of course, us helping you in the direction of that case. And then finally, we have in the past had three sort of broad categories of case: short, medium, and long. I think the plan as we move forward is to look for shorter case studies. So, I mean, we will, of course, discuss longer case studies if you have ideas for case studies that are much longer. But typically, we're going to be looking for shorter case studies of around about 2,500 words, because they're more easily digestible, and I think probably students find them more engaging than those much longer ones. So that's what we're looking for. Before I move on, does anybody from the ES team have anything they want to add to that? Something I may have missed, or something that you might wish to disagree with? No, that makes me happy. Great. Okay, so then moving on to how to get started. So you can contact us directly. That's my email address there, evansj4@aston.ac.uk. But we will also put our email addresses in the chat. And of course, you can contact Pearson at any time, and they'll also be able to put you into contact with us, or anybody involved with the ES development of the book. we'll be able to put you into contact with us. So do feel free to contact us directly to get that process started. And what we'll ask you to do is to complete a short proposal form. It's really, really simple. It doesn't take long at all, but it does allow you to think about how the case is aligned and the type of things that you might want to do with it. And then when that comes back to us, we'll have a chat with you and we'll discuss how you want to proceed. Now, it could be that you have no case at all and it's just an idea. And so we can work with you in sort of developing that idea, getting in your first drafts and so on. It might be that you already have a case that you use or you've been developing for a while that you would like to develop for the book. And we've worked on lots and lots of those as well. And we'd be more than happy to work with you on that as a more of a kind of editing and alignment job. Whichever way it is, don't hesitate to contact us directly and we'll work with you very happily on those cases. There is a sum, a fee paid for the contribution that you make. Unfortunately, you won't be a millionaire from it, but it is a sum that's paid. I haven't been made aware of exactly what that is yet, but naturally, I'll let you know when you contact us to talk about the proposal. And we'll let you know as soon as possible what that would be. But yes, there is a fee. And I think that brings me to the end of my part here, other than to outline the schedule of work, so that if you're thinking about a case, what does it look like in terms of your commitment to time? So typically we'll be looking for your first drafts, as Richard said, in October 24. Then we'll develop it, continue to develop it to final development around about December 24, which is when we'll submit for submission to the developers of the final text. As that's going on, we'll also be working with you on your teaching notes, and we'd expect those drafts in around about Jan 24 with a finalisation of those notes in February 24. So a couple of months after the final submission of the case. So as it stands, we've still got...
Jason, it's actually Jan 25 and Feb 25.
Oh, yes, of course it is. Thank you, Clive. That's a classic. Sorry. And I'm supposed to be a proofreader as well. That's not a great start. Of course it is. Thank you, Clive. I'm just glad it did go to everybody and you've just picked it up now. So, you know. So, yes, sorry, Jan 25 and Feb 25, of course it is. So a couple of months after the submission of the final draft of your. So that's what we'd be looking at in time, in terms of time commitments. As I say, there's still plenty of time to get moving and get it done. But if you do have a case, I'd urge you to contact us as soon as possible to make sure that we can get started as soon as possible and make sure that it's a nice, smooth and ultimately satisfying process for you. So thank you very much. That is the end of what I have to say. Rufus, I have finished a bit early. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has, or of course take contributions from anybody who's here. Otherwise, I think I might have given you back 10 minutes of time.
You have. Firstly, thank you, Jason, and thank you, Clive, Jocelyne, Rafa, and Oksana. Does anybody have any immediate questions for any of the case crew?
Perhaps can I just add that I think we've had a couple of examples even today of different origins of the cases. I mean, I think, you know, Oksana's case originally came from that exploring strategy workshop. I think it was the first one we had in the Strand, and she developed it rather wonderfully from that. We had some others. I know my own case on organised crime developed with discussing with Gerry a role play that we were doing, and from that we were kind of encouraged to develop it into a case. Some of the others are on data, which we've seen, I think, in different contexts, but I think there are lots of different ways of starting the cases. So can I just echo what Jason said? If you have any concept, and it may not yet be in case form, I think we're really happy to work with you to see how it could be developed in a case. And in particular, you know, often if you haven't had a case form, but you've been doing things like role plays or kind of activity sessions in classes with students, then actually that works very well in developing it into the kind of structure that you need for the teaching note and the teaching preparation. So happily work with any of you on that. So even if your idea sounds a bit kind of, you know, off the wall, a bit crazy, come and propose it to us. I mean, we can also be as diplomatically sensitive as possible in saying, I don't think that's going to work. But often we can really do, and for the cases themselves, if you can get a real spectrum of different sorts of cases, I think it's good for the book and good for teaching. So if you've got the slightest idea, come to Jason and the team and we'll try and work with you and develop it.
That's great. Thank you, Clive. As Jason mentioned, we are a few minutes ahead of schedule. We're due for another break now, and then it's Duncan's section on publishing to make a difference before lunch. Duncan, do you want to, shall we shorten the break slightly, have say 7 minutes until past? You start 10 minutes early and then we'll add 10 minutes to lunch.
That seems to make sense, yes.
Okay, so we've got a short break now until past, and then at past we'll come back for publishing to make a difference.
Fine.
Okay. Thanks everybody, see you soon.
Thank you.